And they can either do that with Europe or they can put their own system. And I was delighted that last week in Russia we agreed on Friday that we will try to articulate a voluntary agreement with them using their own certification system. And this is why, in principle, they're very interested now in the spatial data infrastructure for Europe, because it's worth a huge amount of money, and it's also worth a lot in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a huge incentive now to get this right. But we have some challenges. The challenges really are that we have a multiplicity of platforms across our administrations. In terms of e-government, we have many, many different ways in which governments have organized themselves, differences in how much is given out to the public, how much cadastral information is maintained within agencies, and so on and so forth. One of the things that we also see is, having gone to mostly, in fact all of our countries now, as we call them SICE visits, we have, of course, discovered that some parts of government are moving ahead very quickly in terms of spatial data infrastructure, investing and actually putting a lot of effort into translating the day-to-day business into how they can work together. And we've had, I think, a real call to the agency to discover whether it is possible to come with more streamlining, but also to look again at the investment profiles that countries have put in to their IT. And out of that has come a long discussion from us about how to move towards cloud computing. Now, before everyone says, what on earth is cloud computing and it's not secure, I can tell you, actually, having had quite a lot of time working in this business and actually working in the cloud for quite some time, actually your data is more secure in the cloud than it is probably on your data server sitting at the back of your office. So I'll just leave that thought with you. I think probably people in the Commission might be horrified to know that a lot of their basic data about their pay and everything else is also held on a cloud. That's a nicely kept secret, so those of you who didn't know that, you might want to think about that as well. So the Commission itself is moving towards cloud computing. We have already moved, and we are already maintaining and running many of our near real-time services. Now, you don't have to put everything onto a cloud, but the reason why I put it here is because what it tends to do is really tackle three major issues. One, it actually allows you access to more computing power as and when you need it. So if you have to do a high number of transactions at different times. It allows you to actually break up your data and keep it together in more secure ways, to have multiple copies. But it's not for everything. But I do think that for our provision of services in this area, this is what we will continue to now develop. So I'm kind of giving forewarning of the way in which we will create our architecture in which the Inspire datasets and reference datasets will sit. So there are multiple ways in which we can access cloud computing. There's private computing, there's public computing. Amazon runs everything on a cloud, and so on and so forth. There's different formulations. So we really do see that there's now a great appetite, I would say, across the world for all different kind of applications to move in and out of the cloud depending on what you want to use. My current estimate is that in terms of pure transactions and infrastructure costs, the agency, which has a pretty hefty bill, I have to say, for computing, will be looking at something like a 60% reduction in running costs by moving onto the cloud with our spatial data. So this is a significant reduction in running costs because we pay on a transaction of bulk level. So I'm very happy to talk to anyone in detail about this, but there's a real point in which, in these days of recession, it is worth looking at. Now, why do we also want to use the cloud? Well, we're pretty convinced that this is a telling feature. Many, many people don't know enough or feel they have enough access to information. And every time we put a new service up, a spatial one which has got a neighborhood element to it, we see the transaction numbers just go up. And they go up and up and up. They just never go down. We're up in the millions. And so therefore we have to accommodate the fact that the more information we put out there, the more people want to look at it. And with that in mind, I certainly could never imagine being able to run and survive and provide the services to the Commission at the scale that we think they need on just simply the servers that we can afford to run ourselves. So we have created a platform called Eye on Earth. It's a public platform, it's a public good, it's freely available, of course. What I'm delighted to say is that in its inception, I first formulated the idea that we wanted to speak to the public in a two-way process. So we put information out, but we want to listen back to what the public says. And heretically, they told us actually a lot about what they thought. So this is the kind of structure behind it. We've anticipated pretty much everything that we see will be needed: in situ data, modeling data, Earth observation, and so on. This is what it looks like. Welcome you to go and have a look at it. What you see displayed at the moment are two data streams. One is near real time, updated every hour and every 6 hours, with a model from the troposphere. And it tells you down at your single location what the air quality is, and I'll show you a slide of that. But essentially you can see there are 3 histograms in green. So that's ozone, PM, and NOx. For water, there's bathing water, and that will also begin to be updated more frequently as well. There's also an SMS service for people who have breathing disorders, so they can receive an alert as to whether the air quality where they live is good or bad. You can go right down, of course, to the street level. You can go right down to your house. And this now is good for pretty much, well, certainly all of Europe. We have bird's eye views. But what I'm delighted to say is that the US federal government have agreed to bring their Air Watch, their Air Now, on, and the Canadians as well. So we're really beginning to see that there's a multiple use in the way in which we're going to operate the platform. What's our goal then? I'll just finish on this. Our aim really is to really bridge the gap between the Inspire work that you're doing, building in the GMES data streams, making it on the basis of the principles of SICE, freely available as a public good, and then delivering that as far as we can and as well as we can through mobile services and through different kinds of map viewers. So we're completely Catholic on this. We could use Google Earth, we'll use Bing Maps, we'll use whatever you want. And that's really our point. We really reach out to our users on the basis that we think that there should be access to multiple layers for people to do their own mashups and to create their own applications. And this is really the point. The GIS technology is just rapidly moving ahead, so that in our latest discussions with Esri, we've really now looked at this idea, not only of the crowdsourcing and the mashups, but really trying to bring this out into the working environment so that people out in the field can make these specific mashups for their work very, very simply and very cheaply. And I have to say, the cost is just falling and tumbling. So it's at this point I have to say that we were really pleased when we managed to sign a kind of agreement with Esri a few weeks ago. Having been on and on at them for a new business model, they finally gave in. And they've offered, through the ArcGIS version 10, a pot of money worth about $10 million, which means that our 900 participating institutions will all have access to the data, to the software for free, thank goodness. So if you are one of our 900 institutions, you will have all the software for free, and we can actually then begin to develop these mobile GIS technologies with you. And just to give you an idea then, so we anticipate putting the GMES land monitoring portal onto that kind of a platform. We think we'll bring all of the GEOS data down in that way, and obviously I would love it if we could work away with Inspire to make sure that that was well articulated into the same fabric. We see a lot of web services being made available, not by ourselves only, by others, administration. We currently run Eye on Earth instantaneously in 25 languages. So we've worked out a system to run languages on the fly using a semantic web. So we do see that these map services will be provided in all the languages of the Union. We hope we'd actually add Russian as well. So there's a whole range of them, OpenGIS as well as many others. I think in the end, though, we're trying to build communities. We're trying to build people who use these kinds of information comprehensively and develop their own systems, knowing that we, together as a community, have qualified and put quality assurance on the standards that you're now developing. So that's one of the steps we also need to anticipate, is quality assurance systems. The costs, as I say, are falling. When we started in this business 3 or 4 years ago, each application was costing us about $250,000. I would say that on average it's about 30,000. So they are tumbling down, the costs. And in a way, we have to anticipate the fact that people will want to make their own startups, their own web applications out of the reference data sets that we're creating. There's also all sorts of things you can do. You can make YouTubes and